Hello there and welcome to this week's review rundown. Let's dive right in. Let's talk about Nonas first. A new Netflix release that brings together food, grief and a whole bunch of Italian grandmas in one kitchen. Sounds like comfort food cinema, right? Kind of. The film stars Vince Vaughn as Joey, a middle-aged guy who's dealing with some serious emotional baggage. He's lost his mother, he's stuck in a dead-end job, and he's sort of floating through life. And then, almost on a whim, he decides to open up a restaurant. But not just any restaurant, he hires a crew of Italian grandmothers or nonnas to run the kitchen. It's meant to be this heartwarming, home-style place serving up nostalgia and healing. Now, that setup has all the ingredients for a feel-good film, and to be fair, Nonas does serve up a few warm moments. It's familiar, it's soft, it's warm, it doesn't really push boundaries, but maybe that's the point. If you're just looking for something safe and low stakes after a long day, this could be your thing. But let's be real, it's not exactly a feast for the senses. For a film about food, you don't actually see much of the food, and that's kind of a miss. You think about movies like Chef or Big Night where the cooking scenes are mouth-watering and rich with emotion. Nonas does not quite give you that. That said, the cast is stacked. Susan Sarandon, Lorraine Bracco, Talia Shire, legends. They play these tough, tender grandmas who bring some life into the story even if their characters aren't all that fleshed out. And Vince Vaughn, while a bit subdued here, still manages to pull through with a few charming moments. So, is this movie groundbreaking? Not at all. But if you're someone who liked the best exotic marigold hotel or just wants something a little comforting and easy to digest, this might be a sweet, if slightly undercooked option for the weekend. Alright, so this next one had a lot of people curious and for good reason. It's a Malayalam fantasy drama called Lovely, and on paper it actually sounds kind of adorable. A young man in prison ends up befriending a talking housefly. Yes, a literal fly. And it's not a metaphor, it's a full-on friendship between a lonely guy and a chatty insect. Now, before your mind jumps to Ega or Makhi where the fly is on a wild revenge mission, Lovely takes a completely different route. This one's meant to be more emotional, more feel-good. You've got Matthew Thomas playing Bonnie, a guy who's just trying to move on after losing his father and getting into a mess that he did not see coming. But instead of focusing on that journey, the film kind of meanders a lot. Look, visually, Lovely is honestly stunning. The cinematography, the CGI, even the 3D, all top-notch. They've done a great job making that fly feel real, grounded in the scenes and not cartoony. And you can tell that the technical team put their heart into it. But here's the thing, when it comes to story and character, it doesn't really hold up. You keep waiting for something deeper to happen, something that justifies this really unusual connection between Bonnie and the fly, but instead the film throws in all sorts of disconnected scenes and you're left wondering, wait, why is this happening? It never really builds that emotional core it's clearly aiming for. And Matthew Thomas, who we've seen do great work before, his performance here just does not land. It feels stiff, like he's not quite sure what he's supposed to be feeling, and as a result, neither are we. Even during what should be sweet or whimsical moments with the fly, it comes off a bit flat. The voice work for Lovely the Fly, though, that's probably one of the brighter spots. Sivangi Krishnakumar does a genuinely lovely job, but again, it's let down by the writing. So, bottom line, Lovely is one of those films where the visuals far outshine the story. It had the potential to be a touching, offbeat little gem, but instead it ends up feeling like a beautiful shell with not much inside. So if you're going purely for the visuals or to support some top-tier technical work, you might still find something to appreciate, but do not expect to come out emotionally moved or narratively satisfied. Alright, now for all Final Destination fans, myself included, buckle up, because Final Destination is back. It's the 6th film in the franchise and honestly, it tries to go out with a bang. Or more accurately, several. So the setup is no stranger to us. It's the same formula we all know. Death does not like being cheated. And it has an elaborate, very creative way of making sure no one escapes. But what Bloodlines does differently is this: it roots the whole story in a family, a close-knit, multi-generational group that somehow becomes the target of this weird, almost cosmic revenge plot. And the film starts really strong. There's this eerie sense of tension. You're scanning every object on screen thinking, is that glass going to explode? Is that chandelier about to fall? It keeps you guessing. And when the first big set piece hits, at a glitzy rooftop restaurant 500 feet in the air, you can feel the anxiety in your bones. I mean, let's be honest, this franchisee has always been less about the plot and more about the how than the why. And in that department, Bloodlines still delivers. Now, Brec Bassinger, who plays Iris, the one who kind of kicks this whole thing off, is actually really solid. She's grounded, believable, and probably gives one of the better performances this series has seen in a while. And yes, Tony Todd is back, because what's a Final Destination movie without that voice of doom? But here's where things start to wobble a bit. Once the initial shock wears off, the film shifts into more familiar territory. Some characters feel a bit too thinly written, some moments start leaning a little too hard into the camp, and there's a stretch where you're wondering, wait, are we supposed to be laughing or crying? Because when one of the characters loses her entire family and then is just sort of forgotten by the plot, it gets weirdly uncomfortable. Still, credit where it's due, this film does not play it lazy. The direction by Guy Busick, Laurie Evans-Taylor and John Watts is tight. They know how to keep you engaged even if the emotional beats don't always land. So yes, Final Destination Bloodlines is not perfect, but it's a wild ride. If you've grown up watching these films, or you just want a few inventive deaths and that slow burn dread only this franchisee can deliver, it's worth checking out. Death, it seems, always has one last trick up its sleeve. This is it for this week's review rundown. Stay tuned. Until next time, this is Nia signing off.